So welcome everyone. I'm Diane Riley, the president of Carson & Saint, for those of you who may not know me. Thank you so much for coming today to hear about our latest Saint Draco release. And we have added some new features and upgrades and improvements, even including enhancements to our reporting and a newly integrated integration with our CISA known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, just to name a few. And so Sam Kline, who is our CTO, which you're probably very familiar with, is with me today. And Sam's going to go through what's new. And since I've already started stealing his thunder, I am going to let him take it away and turn it over to him. So Sam, it's all yours.
Thanks, Diane. So here's the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to go through and give you an overview of some of the new features that are coming out in Draco. And then that'll be followed by a live demo where I'll show you what these features look like in the Saint web interface. And then at the end, we'll spend a few minutes to take some questions. So the first new feature coming out in the new Draco release next Tuesday will be a new color scheme for the charts and reports. So there's a sample of it shown here. You'll notice some softer colors than what you were used to before. And there's also the ability to customize your colors. So if you want to change the colors in the charts, you can now do so. And I'll show you how to do that a little bit later when we do the demo. Another new feature coming out in Draco next Tuesday is integration with the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. So this is a catalog which CISA maintains, which is a database of CVEs which are known to have been exploited in the wild. And that's useful information because that can tell you which vulnerabilities that Saint detects have been exploited in the wild, and then you can prioritize those vulnerabilities accordingly. And I'll show you what that looks like in the web interface a little bit later. There have been some performance and scalability improvements. Now, these probably won't really be of interest to maybe 95% of our customers, but for those customers who may be large MSPs who are scanning lots of customers simultaneously, these could be useful features as well. A few other things coming out in Saint Draco, new platform support. So you may be aware that Ubuntu 22.04, which is the latest LTS release of Ubuntu, was released in April, and Saint Draco will be able to run on that platform. We're also expecting Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9 to be released shortly, and Saint will be able to run on that platform as well. Saint will also run on Python 3. So as you may or may not be aware, Python 2 reached end of life already. And so Saint Draco will now run on Python 3. If you have an existing installation which is using Python 2, you're going to need to switch that to Python 3. And I'll show you how that'll work when we get to the live demo. We've also done some info blocks improvements. So if you might remember from the last webinar, in Saint Callisto, we introduced an integration with info blocks. And we've been, even though that integration came out last version, we've still been working a bit on that integration. And so we have some changes to that integration coming out in Draco. A few other new things to note coming out in Draco. We have a new option to enable scan failure notifications. So if you're the type of user who is running many scans per day, and you might not necessarily be able to watch all of those scans as they run, you now have the ability to be notified by email if anything goes wrong with any of those scans, such as license failures or probe timeouts or inability to scan. Those will all turn out to be notifications in your inbox if you choose to enable that feature. We also have a new feature which shows you the first detected and the last detected dates in the analytics and reports and dashboards, and also available from the API. So if you're analyzing multiple data sets together to try to look for trends in your vulnerabilities. This will let you quickly and easily see which vulnerabilities have been there the longest and which ones are the newest. So that takes me to my demo. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. So here we have the web interface for St. Draco. If you're a longtime St. user, then this probably already looks familiar to you. Not a whole lot has changed with the web interface itself. However, there are some new things I'd like to show you. First, I'm going to show you what the report looks like in St. Draco. So I'm just going to open up this report. And as you can see here, the color scheme have changed a bit. We have some softer colors here. If you remember in previous versions of Saint, you kind of had that bright fluorescent kinds of reds, yellows, and browns in your severity chart. We chose some softer colors here. It gives it a little bit more appealing look. And we also have some new colors for the host types. So we're down here where you see the Linux and the Windows host type chart. You see that's monochromatic. The CVSS gauge also, we use monochromatic colors. So these are just colors that we chose that would be a little bit more current, aligned with the industry standard. But if you don't like those colors, then you still have the opportunity to change them. Let me show you how that would work. So we go to Create Report. This is the reporting wizard. You may already be familiar with this wizard. If we go to step 5, the other options, and we click on Advanced Options, and then there's a tab here which says Color and Style. This is where you can go ahead and change any of the chart colors that you want to. So for example, I can scroll down the severity chart, the vulnerabilities by severity that we were looking at before. Suppose we didn't like the new softer red color. You can click here to change it. So suppose we want to go back to the bright red that it had before, like the pure red. I can just move that up there on the color picker, click OK. And now you can see that it's a bright red. It's choosing the pure red for the severity red color. If we want to do the same thing for the yellow, we can do that. Just slide it on up here using the color picker. And now we also have a pure yellow color. And we can do that not just for the severity colors, but like for the CVSS gauge that we were looking at before, we can choose the high, medium, and low color. The host type chart, which was the monochromatic blue, we can choose new colors for that if we wish. So pretty much all the colors in the same charts are now configurable. So once you choose the color scheme you like, you can just save that as a custom report type and then keep on using those color schemes for as long as you wish. So I also mentioned previously that we now integrate with CISA, the CISA Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. Let me show you what that would look like. So I'm going to go over here to All Results. So this is the analytics grid. And I'm going to go ahead and add some columns here. So most of these columns you're already familiar with, but there is something new here, and that is the CISA Known Exploited column. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to add that. And I'm going to slide it up so it's closer to, so it's kind of in the middle there. And click OK. And now we can see there's this new column here, CISA Known Exploited. So what this tells us is whether or not the vulnerability is known to have been exploited in the wild. So for most of these, it's no, meaning that the vulnerability is not known to be exploited in the wild, but we can see that a few of them are yes. For example, this third one here, let me scroll over and see what that is. So that's the April 2022 security update for Windows Server. And then there's another yes down here, which is the log4j, obviously that one's been exploited in the wild, and the Spring framework, if you remember the Spring for shell from a couple of months ago, that one's been exploited in the wild as well. So for all the vulnerabilities, we can see at a glance which ones have been exploited in the wild, and those are the ones that you might want to prioritize in your remediation efforts, because if they're being exploited in the wild, they're more likely to be exploited than ones that aren't. And if you just want to see, if you just want to filter it down to just the vulnerabilities which have been exploited in the wild, you can choose yes here on this drop down. And that filters it down and shows you only the vulnerabilities which are being exploited in the wild. And this information isn't just on this one view. If we want to go to the dashboards, and there is a new dashboard widget here called Total Vulnerabilities by Exploitability. So that's a new widget that we added in St. Draco. And this widget shows you a number of different things. So first of all, it shows you the total vulnerabilities. And then this middle bar here, the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities. So this chart shows us that of the 233 vulnerabilities detected in this scan, 60 of them are included on the CISA known vulnerabilities catalog, so that we know that there are 60 which were detected in this scan, which are known to be exploited in the wild. And those may be the first ones you want to fix. So going back to our analytics, another new feature that I mentioned a little bit earlier was the first detected and the last detected. So I'm going to go back to my column chooser. And here we see these new columns, which weren't there before, the first detected and the last detected. I'm going to go ahead and add both of those. And I'm going to slide them up so they're near the CISA known exploited. And click OK. So now we see two new columns, the first detected and the last detected in our analytics grid. And so we can see for each of these vulnerabilities, or for most of these vulnerabilities, they were first detected on May 8th, and then they were later detected on May 18th. So that gives us some good information there. We know that this vulnerability came up in more than one scan and has not yet been remediated. If we want to filter it down, if we want to see what vulnerabilities may have been new, and say we can filter it down to just the vulnerabilities which are detected after May 15th. So I go like that, and we see that there are two vulnerabilities that match that filter. Both of these vulnerabilities were detected on May 18 and last detected on May 18. So they were only detected once. And the last detected column is also filterable. So say we want to find vulnerabilities that were last detected. Let's see if we can find vulnerabilities that were last detected before May 15th. And we see that there are two vulnerabilities that were last detected on May 8th. And these vulnerabilities were either remediated or they stopped appearing in our scan results for some other reason. So this shows us which vulnerabilities are no longer present. We can also sort by these columns. So you just click on the column header, and then this will show us the vulnerabilities in order by when they were first detected. So you can see the oldest ones first. You can also see the newest ones first by clicking again. That'll sort it in descending order. So this could be a useful feature for helping you visualize how many vulnerabilities you have which are no longer present, or how many vulnerabilities you have which have been coming up for a long time, or which just started coming up, or which used to come up and no longer come up. I mentioned earlier that we have some new performance issues. One of those is under the Manager tab here, and it's this one, the maximum analytics processes. So this is the maximum number of analytics processes that can run at the same time. So this can be useful if you want to use more of your system resources for post-scan processing, then you could raise this up as long as your system has the resources to allow it. Or if you don't want to use a lot of system resources for post-scan processing, if you just kind of want to let this scan sit in that completed state for a while and you don't mind if they finish processing a day later, then you could reduce this down to 1. And if you reduce it down to 1, that'll save more of the system resources for actual scanning and fewer of the system resources for the post-scan processing. Of course, then if you're running a lot of scans, those scans will get queued up for processing after they finish. But in some cases, it may be okay. You may not really need to deliver the results right away, and you'd rather just have them kind of sit in the queue rather than using your system processes for post-scan processing. Another new option is under the API tab here, and that's what we call memory saving mode. So this feature will prevent excessive memory buildup in the API process by spawning child processes to handle individual API requests. So this probably isn't necessary for 95% of our customers. It works just fine without this option. But if you're one of the customers that finds that you kind of need to restart Saint every day because the API process keeps on consuming more and more memory cumulatively, then you can just check this box here. And that should prevent the excessive memory buildup. There might be a slight performance impact, so this feature isn't necessarily a good idea for everyone to use. But if you're one of the customers that needs it, then it's a good idea to go ahead and check it, and then you won't have the problem with the cumulative memory buildup in the API process anymore. Another feature I mentioned before was the notifications, the scan failure notifications. So let me go to the scanning options. And there's a new tab for that here, scan failure notifications. You can enable it just by checking the box here and then putting in your email address. And then down here, you can choose which events you want to be notified about. So by default, it's just license errors. And when the scan window has been exceeded, such as when you have a scan where you've configured a scan window, and any fatal errors in the scan. However, you can also choose to be notified whenever an individual probe crashes or whenever a probe timeouts, or whenever there are authentication failures in one of your scans or errors in the scan engine. So any of these events could be used to trigger a notification. So you no longer have to check every few hours to make sure that all of your scans are succeeding. Now you can be notified just when there's a failure. I also noticed before that there are some info blocks. There were some info blocks features. Let me go back and show you. So in St. Callisto, which is the current version now, we introduced some info block scanning features. You can now import targets directly from your info blocks machine. And there's this option here, import targets from info blocks in the scan wizard. If you click on that, all you have to do is put in your info blocks credentials, and then you can choose what you want to import from, either subnet, you can import a subnet, or you can import an IP range, or you can import a zone. But now we have this new drop-down menu for importing zones. So of course now it's, I don't actually have any info blocks credentials put in right now, which is why there's nothing in the zones menu. But if we had actually configured this to use an info block server, then as soon as I choose zone here, it would give us a drop-down menu of our info block zones to allow us to just choose a zone rather than having to remember IP address ranges and stuff like that. There's also this new checkbox here for generate the target list based on the selected criteria at scan runtime. So previously it would just do the import at scan wizard, at scan setup time. And then those IP addresses would kind of be fixed in your scan job. Now we have this checkbox so that if we're importing scan result, or if we're importing scan targets from info blocks, that can happen at scan runtime. So every time you run the scan, it'll go ahead and import that zone again to make sure that it always has the most current list of targets from info blocks. So that's about it for what I had in mind for the demo. So if there are any questions, I can go ahead and take those now.